On March 17, 1943, a single sheet of paper landed on Hitler's desk. It came from Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of Germany's military intelligence. The report was clear. Ford's Willow Run plant in Michigan could produce one B-24 Liberator bomber every hour around the clock. Hitler read it and tossed it aside. But that paper was a death sentence. While he ignored it, 42,000 American workers, many women, black Americans, and those his ideology deemed inferior, were already proving the numbers right. This is the story of a factory-turned-weapon, ideology-blinding strategy, and one report foretelling the Third Reich's fall. March 17, 1943. Berlin. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris sat in his office at Tirpitzufer, the Abwehr headquarters. In his hands were intelligence reports from German agents operating in the United States. The numbers didn't make sense. They couldn't be real. Yet, they were. Canaris was no ordinary intelligence chief. A decorated U-boat commander from World War I, he had joined the Nazi Party in its early days, believing Hitler would save Germany from communism. But by 1938, after witnessing SS atrocities in Poland, 200 Jews burned alive in a synagogue at Bedzin, Canaris turned. He became a man playing the most dangerous double game in history. Hitler's spy master by day, secret resistance leader by night. But this report, this wasn't about resistance. This was about arithmetic. The Abwehr had been tracking American industrial output since 1941. What they discovered in early 1943 was staggering. Ford Motor Company's Willow Run plant in Ypsilanti, Michigan, was producing B-24 Liberator heavy bombers using automobile assembly line techniques. Not dozens a month, not hundreds a year. One bomber every 63 minutes. Let that sink in. In the time it takes you to watch a TV show, the Americans could build a 4-engine heavy bomber, 66 feet long, with a 110-foot wingspan, capable of carrying 8,000 pounds of ordnance deep into the heart of the Reich. Canaris compiled the intelligence. He added context. The plant employed 42,000 workers and operated 2 9-hour shifts, 6 days a week. At peak production, reached in April 1944, it produced 453 aircraft in 468 hours. The math was undeniable. He wrote the report, dated it March 17, 1943, and sent it up the chain. To understand why Hitler rejected the report, you have to understand Nazi ideology. And here's where it gets truly horrifying, not because of violence, but because of willful stupidity. The Nazis believed in a racial hierarchy. Germans were the master race, disciplined, efficient, engineered for greatness. Americans, they were a mongrel nation. Soft, obsessed with refrigerators and razor blades. They couldn't build weapons. They couldn't match German engineering. Hermann Göring, Reichsmarschall, commander of the Luftwaffe, Hitler's designated successor, laughed when he heard about American production claims. Don't worry, Göring told his subordinates in 1942, the Americans can't build planes, only electric iceboxes and razor blades. He said this out loud, while American factories were already ramping up. In 1944, the United States would produce 96,270 aircraft. Germany would produce 39,800. But in 1943, Göring was still laughing. Hitler was still dismissing intelligence reports, and men like Canaris, men who understood numbers, who understood logistics, who understood that wars are won by factories as much as by soldiers, were being ignored. This wasn't just arrogance. This was ideology weaponized against reality. Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments, understood the danger. Speer was an architect turned industrial manager, and he had achieved what was called the armaments miracle, tripling German weapons production between 1942 and 1944, despite relentless Allied bombing. But even Speer couldn't change the fundamental problem. Germany was fighting a three-front war with an industrial base that could never match America's. In 1941, Germany produced 11,800 aircraft. The United States produced 19,400. In 1942, Germany produced 15,600, The United States produced 47,800. In 1943, as Canaris was writing his report, Germany would produce 25,500 aircraft. The United States, 85,900. And that was just aircraft. The United States was producing more of everything: tanks, ships, ammunition, vehicles. Henry Ford's River Rouge complex alone, just one factory, employed 120,000 workers and was pumping out material at a rate Germany couldn't dream of matching. But Hitler didn't want to hear it. Goering didn't want to believe it. December 1940, Washington, D.C. The U.S. government approached Ford Motor Company with an urgent request: build 1,200 B-24 bombers. Charles Sorensen, Ford's chief engineer, traveled to San Diego to observe Consolidated Aircraft's operations, the company that designed the B-24. What he saw shocked him. Men were building bombers the way craftsmen build furniture. Outdoors, one at a time, wings attached to makeshift rigs, fuselages assembled by hand. It was slow, it was inefficient, it was, Sorensen realized, completely wrong. That night in his hotel room, Sorensen sketched out a new vision. What if you built bombers the way you built cars? Assembly lines, standardized parts, parallel production of subassemblies converging at precise intervals. He drew the outline of what would become Willow Run on hotel stationery. One night, one sketch, it would change warfare forever. By April 1941, construction began on 975 acres of Michigan farmland. The architect was Albert Kahn, a genius who had already revolutionized factory design. Kahn had designed Ford's Highland Park plant, the River Rouge complex, and over 1,000 factories for Ford alone. He understood something fundamental. The building had to serve the production process, not the other way around. Willow Run would cover 3.5 million square feet, one of the largest buildings in the world. The assembly line would run a mile long, with a unique 90-degree turn. 6 runways would be built adjacent to the plant, so bombers could roll straight from the line to flight tests. The plant was dedicated on June 6, 1941, 6 months before Pearl Harbor. But making it work, that was a nightmare. Aircraft weren't cars. The B-24 had 30,000 parts. It required 1,550,000 rivets. The government kept changing designs. Every modification required expensive and time-consuming updates to the assembly line. By early 1943, critics were calling the plant "Will It Run?" Senator Harry Truman investigated twice, in April 1942 and February 1943, questioning whether Ford could deliver on its promises. Ford had only built 37 planes in January 1943, 70 in February, and 96 in March. But then, something happened. The bugs got worked out, the workforce got trained, the process got refined. In April 1943, 1 month after Canaris's report, Ford produced 146 bombers. By November 1943, they had produced their 1,000th B-24. And by April 1944, they were producing 1 bomber every 63 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Let me give you some details that would have terrified any German general who bothered to listen. Willow Run wasn't just big. It was a self-contained industrial ecosystem. The government built the nation's second freeway, now a 94, specifically to move workers and materials to the plant. In 1943, they spent $20 million constructing an entire community adjacent to the factory. In a matter of days, they erected dormitories for single workers and 3,000 small houses for families. The village included 30 dormitories, 6 community buildings, commercial facilities, police and fire stations, and schools. The plant itself was a cathedral of industrial efficiency. Ford had created a permanent jig for assembling the B-24's center wing section, the main structure to which all other parts attached. Consolidated Aircraft had built each wing with its own temporary jig. Ford's permanent system reduced assembly time from 250 man-hours to 1 hour. The center wing consisted of 6,439 individual parts, fastened together with 78,606 rivets and 1,000 bolts. A 27.5-ton structure, Ford's overhead crane system could lift the completed wing, roll it to the next station, and reset the fixture in just 2 minutes. At peak efficiency, Willow Run produced 100 completed bombers flying away from the plant between April 24th and April 26, 1944. 3 days, 100 bombers. The factory's output was so immense that pilots and crew members slept on 1,300 cots as they waited for B-24s to roll off the assembly line. By the end of the war, Willow Run had produced 8,685 B-24s, nearly half of all Liberators built. The plant also manufactured knockdown kits, 1,893 sets of parts shipped to Consolidated in Fort Worth and Douglas Aircraft in Tulsa for final assembly, 92 million pounds of airplanes, and this was just one factory. Boeing was producing 16 B-17 Flying Fortresses per day at its Seattle plant. Consolidated was building B-24s in San Diego and Fort Worth. Douglas was building bombers in Oklahoma and California. Now, remember what the Nazis believed. Germans were the master race. Everyone else, especially Jews, slaves, black people, and what they called inferior peoples, were subhuman, incapable of greatness. So let me tell you who built Willow Run. With young men drafted into military service, Ford began hiring women. By May 1942, 15% of the Willow Run workforce was women, and they were earning the same wages as men for the same jobs. By the summer of 1944, women made up a significant portion of the 42,000 workers at peak employment. They were riveters, welders, mechanics. Rose Will Monroe, a riveter at Willow Run, became the inspiration for Rosie the Riveter, the cultural icon of America's wartime women. African Americans worked alongside whites, older workers who couldn't serve in combat, young men classified 4F, unable to fight but able to build. This diverse workforce, this mongrel workforce as Nazi ideology would have called it, was outproducing the entire German aviation industry. And they were doing it with American efficiency, American ingenuity, and American democracy. Let me give you a comparison that would have made Hitler's head explode. In 1942, Germany was spending 58% more money on defense procurement than Britain, but the actual size of production was smaller. Why? Because labor productivity was catastrophically low. That same year, only 1/10 of the German labor force in tank, artillery, and armored vehicle industries worked double shifts. In the aircraft industry, only 33% worked double shifts. Meanwhile, Willow Run was running 2 9-hour shifts, 6 days a week, with the remaining 6 hours used to restock parts and change tooling. Germany relied on slave labor, concentration camp prisoners, POWs, and civilians dragged from occupied territories. By September 1944, 7.5 million foreigners were working as slave laborers in German industry. 2 million prisoners of war, in direct violation of the Hague and Geneva Conventions, were exploited under Albert Speer's direction. And they still couldn't match American production. Because here's the thing about slavery. It's not just morally abhorrent, it's economically stupid. Slave labor is unmotivated, unskilled, sabotage-prone, and inefficient. Free workers, paid fair wages, motivated by patriotism and pride in their work, they built one bomber every 63 minutes. On March 17, 1943, in Hitler's office, Canaris's report lay on the desk. One factory producing one bomber per hour. Hitler read it and dismissed it. Not because the intelligence was flawed, not because the math was wrong, but because it contradicted his worldview. Americans can only build refrigerators, he'd said. Therefore, the report must be false. Göring reinforced this delusion. He had promised Hitler that no enemy bomber would ever reach the Ruhr. He'd said, "If one reaches the Ruhr, my name is not Göring. You can call me Meyer." By 1943, Allied bombers were reaching Berlin. Goering was busy blaming his pilots for cowardice rather than acknowledging the truth. Germany was losing the air war. Hitler had other priorities. In November 1943, he was obsessed with the Messerschmitt Me 262, the world's first operational jet fighter. When shown the aircraft, Hitler's only question was, can it carry bombs? His engineers were confused. It was designed as a fighter to shoot down enemy bombers. Adolf Galland, one of Germany's top aces, tried to explain, this aircraft could give Germany air superiority. But Hitler wanted a Blitz bomber. He wanted to strike terror into Allied troops during the inevitable invasion. So Germany's revolutionary jet fighter was redesigned as a bomber. Production was delayed. By the time Me-262S entered service in meaningful numbers, it was 1945, far too late. This pattern repeated everywhere. Hitler had ordered a development stop for the Luftwaffe in 1941 because the war was already won. New aircraft designs were put on hold. Why develop better planes when the victory seemed inevitable? When it became clear the war would not be over soon, it was too late to catch up. Albert Speer begged Hitler to prioritize fighter production. Hitler refused. He wanted bombers. He wanted V-2 rockets, which cost $2 billion and accomplished nothing strategically. That same money could have produced 24,000 fighters. Speer later said, I shall never forget the date May 12, 1944. On that day, the technological war was decided. He was referring to the Allied bombing of the Leuna synthetic oil plant. German fuel production collapsed. All those fighters Speer had managed to build, grounded, useless. And throughout all of this, Canaris watched. He'd tried to warn them. He'd presented the facts, the numbers, the intelligence. He even went further, meeting secretly with British and American officials, offering peace terms if Germany removed Hitler. Churchill's response, unconditional surrender. Canaris tried assassination. In March 1943, the same month as his Willow Run report, he flew to Smolensk to help plan Hitler's murder. The attempt failed. So what's the lesson here? It's not just that America outproduced Germany, though we did, staggeringly. It's not just that ideology made Hitler blind, though it absolutely did. The real lesson is this: reality doesn't care about your beliefs. Hitler believed Americans were weak. Goering believed they couldn't build planes. Nazi ideology insisted that only Aryans could achieve greatness. None of it mattered. The women of Willow Run built bombers. The African-American workers built bombers. The diverse, mongrel, inferior American workforce built 324,750 aircraft and won the war. March 17, 1943. One piece of paper, one intelligence report. Canaris knew what it meant. Speer eventually figured it out. Even some German generals understood. But Hitler? He tossed it aside. Because in the end, fascism doesn't just corrupt morality, it corrupts reality itself. It forces you to deny facts, to reject mathematics, to live in a fantasy where will and ideology can overcome production capacity and industrial output. And when reality comes crashing down in the form of 18,000 tons of bombs dropped during Big Week, or fuel shortages that ground your Air Force, or the simple, undeniable fact that one Michigan factory can outbuild your entire aviation industry, it's already too late. The factory that proved Hitler wrong still stands, in part. Most of Willow Run was demolished in 2014, but 175,000 square feet remain, now home to the Yankee Air Museum. The rest of the site, it's now the American Center for Mobility, one of 10 U.S. Department of Transportation designated proving grounds for self-driving cars. From bombers to autonomous vehicles, from defeating fascism to building the future, the women who riveted B-24s. They went on to break barriers in every industry. Rose Monroe became a symbol of a generation that refused to return to pre-war limitations. The diverse workforce? They helped launch the civil rights movement. You can't tell people they're too inferior to work and then watch them build the arsenal that saved democracy. Without that truth reverberating forever, Willow Run wasn't just a factory. It was proof, mathematical, undeniable proof, that diversity isn't weakness, it's strength. That democracy doesn't make you soft, it makes you unstoppable. That facts matter more than ideology. And that sometimes one sheet of paper, dated March 17, 1943, written by a German admiral who knew the truth, can foretell the end of an empire. Willow Run was supposed to be just another factory, steel, concrete, and assembly lines, except it built a bomber every hour. 42,000 workers, women, Black Americans, seniors, 4 Fs. Hitler ignored it and paid the price. But if you think this was the only lesson that Germans learned the hard way, check out this video where we tell you a story about how Germans laughed at the Tuskegee red tails, only to lose 100 planes later.